Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to this online presentation of the Loyola Project documentary. I'm Dr. Vicki Pershak. I'll be helping to facilitate things today. Just to let you know a bit about the agenda, we'll have a short introduction and context of how this film fits with the Windsor area and you as participants. We'll have a 90-minute documentary on the Loyola Ramblers. And then I'll do a brief introduction of Dr. Gary Sales, who'll be our facilitator for looking at issues of race and sport tied to this film. And that should be the conclusion, but we'd like to invite people to submit questions for Gary to answer. If you look in the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A, and you can go in at any point, put your question in, including if you're watching the film, listening at any point. It'll be anonymous. We won't know who you are, but everyone can see the questions and Gary can answer them once he's up as a facilitator. So thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. We're excited to have you view this film. And we'll start with context introduction done by Kevin Milne, Dr. Kevin Milne.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the screening of the Loyola Project. My name is Kevin Milne, and I'm an associate professor in the Faculty of Human Genetics, and I've been lucky enough to work with a great team that helped to bring this film to the University of Windsor. This includes Lancer Men's Basketball, the Faculty of Human Kinetics, the Department of Athletics and Recreational Services, and many great individuals within these different units. Nonetheless, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the film that hopefully lets you know a little bit about what was going on in Windsor at the time that the events in the film were happening. Things I wanted to highlight to you was that the University of Windsor is the only Canadian institution who is a part of the 63 for 63 screening series. Alongside the historical relationship the city of Windsor has had with the city of Detroit, Windsor has also been a hotbed for basketball within Canada. Second thing I want to share with you is that this is a film about a championship team. Hopefully there are no spoilers that I'm giving to you right now, but we're looking at basketball and the brotherhood of basketball players and coaches and other teams in this great sport. But that's Chicago. For those of you who've lived here for a while and know a little bit about your geography, you know that Chicago's, about the same distance away from us as Toronto is. So another major city very close to Windsor. And in fact, I'm sure a lot of us who live in Windsor have actually visited Chicago at one point. And what I wanted to see was, how did Windsor portray this championship? So here's the Windsor version of reporting on this event. And so I looked at the Windsor Star from 1963, about the same date. And you'll see that, a reporter wrote that this is one of the most exciting NCAA tournament finals ever. So it did get some news. But interestingly, when we look at the date of that event, if we just move 7 days into the past, there was another pretty special event that happened in Windsor. And I suspect that maybe there are a few of you that know what that is, but for those of you who don't, Canada had its first ever CIAU basketball championship. So that was our version of the NCAA championship, which had been going on for some time. The other part to that may be interesting is, well, we're sitting in the place where that first CIAU championship was held, the city of Windsor, and we're also hosting this from the institution that was the first ever victors in the first ever CIAU championship, the Assumption Lancers, who would go on to become the University of Windsor Lancers. And so in fact, we are the only other institution hosting this film that can also state that we were national champions in 1963. But the film is not simply about championship basketball. It's also about race relations in the United States, and for that matter, the world. And so here's maybe our first introduction to some of the differences that you may see in the game. But you can look visually at the Assumption Lancer victors and visually at the Loyola Rambler NCAA champions. And you can see that maybe there's some differences in diversity to begin with here. Nonetheless, again, if we look at that period of time, 1963, and we move just 2 days prior to our national championship, and look at something, again, that's very interesting that happened in the city of Windsor. I once again suspect that there are some of you who may know why that date is important, and others where you might be learning something for the first time. So interestingly, looking at newspapers, from 1963, around the time that the NCAA tournament was being played in the United States, and when the CIAU championship was being hosted by Assumption University, I came across articles like this, where we have students who are celebrating and cheering on their home team. So in fact, in this image that you see here, students have climbed the Ambassador Bridge and hung a sign that says, "Go AUW," Go Assumption University of Windsor. But on that same page, I came across an image of someone who's been very important to the world in civil rights, let alone just the United States. Dr. Martin Luther King spoke, one of many times he spoke here, but spoke in Canada and spoke in Windsor just 2 days before our national championship. And in fact, at the same time as some of the games in the Canadian men's basketball tournament was taking place in Windsor. And as he was wont to do, Dr. Martin Luther King, cited challenges and cited what he saw as being the ideals where our world should be moving towards, and said things like, it's time to forget about this notion that there's this idiotic idea that there are superior and inferior races, but also that we need to come together and make a brotherhood. And so looking at one of those statements, when we're able to think morally, making a brotherhood, a sisterhood, whatever you want to call it, is an important part for our world to grow and move forward as intelligent human beings. And there's probably no other place where you see that displayed, every day. Pick your sport, basketball, hockey, soccer, football, where you see groups of individuals coming together in an attempt to achieve one goal. Again, it doesn't matter if you're a 6'10" black man or a 5'9" white man. If you're on the same team, you're working towards a common goal, something to achieve. There's a brotherhood here, and as I said, a sisterhood. Team is probably the best word, obviously used for, in this example. And so interestingly, again, this is the 1963 Loyola Ramblers. If we move forward into 2022, here's their current team, which was able to make the NCAA tournament again this year. And if you look at number 1, Lucas Williamson, that's the narrator of the film you're about to hear. I think there's something important, or about to see. I think there's also something important about this image, is to see the change in diversity amongst the coaching staff. So the individuals in the maroon shirts versus the 1963 team. But if we look to ourselves and the University of Windsor, so these are the Assumption Lancer champions, not from 1963, but from 1964. It's made up of many of the same players. And as I mentioned before, just visually, if we look at the diversity of this team versus the Loyola Ramblers, we can see some differences. But if we move forward into 2022, here are our current University of Windsor Lancers, who were also successful in making the postseason this year. But more importantly, if we look at the change in diversity and a group of young men who are working together to try and achieve a certain goal, we can see some of the progress that has been made in another country. So I'd just like to thank a group of individuals who were important in making this screening series available to us, both the in-person event on Sunday and at this virtual event that you're in today. And that includes the organizing committee, made up of Dr. Vicky Perishak, Ms. Sandra Andraka, Chris Chang, Polly Kocha, Mona Sleeman, Martina Jurisic, and Julia Burrell, all parts of the Faculty of Human Kinetics or the Department of Athletics and Recreational Services, and in particular, Lancer Men's Basketball, who again is one of our co-hosts of this event. I'd also like to give special thanks to Dr. Vincent Georgi and Trevor Pittman, who were instrumental in allowing us to host an in-person event last Sunday, as well as Dr. Sarah G., who's given up her class to allow us to host this virtual screening event. Ms. Helen Ellis-Govette handled all of our finances, and the HK Society, who are always willing to provide students to help out in any type of event that takes place within our halls. We also were financially supported by many groups within the university. That includes Windsor Basketball, WUFA, the Faculty of Human Kinetics, the Office of Human Rights, Equity, and Accessibility, the Office of Student Experience, as well as groups outside the university, including WIF and With One Voice, or Northwestern Mutual. And with their contributions, their financial contributions, we have been able to provide financial contributions to some of the youth community groups that you see on this list. That includes Sandwich Teen Action Group, MH100, Hoopology, Kennedy Prep, Senior Boys Basketball, and the Junior Lancers. And so thank you to everyone who's involved in the screening of this film or bringing this screening to you. And I hope you enjoy the show.
They call it March Madness for a reason. And every tournament is better with an underdog, right?
The hottest thing in Chicago sports right now isn't the Cubs, the Sox, the Bulls, or the Blackhawks.
Here comes the player of the year, the Anthem City rises. Oh!
It's the Loyola Ramblers.
And the dream is alive!
But our journey was more important than the buzzer beaters.
Towns for three. Yes!
With every round we advanced, we were reminded of our past.
Loyola Chicago controls the tip.
Egan into Harkness, turnaround jumper's good. Gary made it first basket. He made it. He might do it.
When you study the early days of basketball,
Loyola Chicago sticks out.
the youth of America, they need to know what that generation went through, and they need to carry the baton.
Jerry Harkness was the captain of that Loyola team and joins us now. What a pleasure it is to meet you, sir.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Custer looking for help. Gets it. Williamson. Down.
My name is Lucas Williamson. I was a freshman in 2018 when the Loyola Ramblers made it to the Final Four. For the first time in 55 years. We were always told how the 63 team made history. But it was in the forgotten details that I found a deeper connection.
Our absolute and unshakable stand for segregation of the races at all levels.
This is not 200 years ago. These are our fathers and our grandfathers that have gone through this. This was more than a game. This was history.
It's time the rest of the world hears their whole story. About those who changed the game by playing it their way. The story of any great team begins with the coach. And in this case, a day he would never forget.
It is very hard for me to think back to that day in 1959. I was in nursing school at Loyola, and I came out of class the one day, and it was just a regular kind of autumn day. My dad was George Ireland. He was the Loyola University basketball coach. There was something different about Dad that day. I don't know if something happened at practice, at school, but I walked over towards Dad's office and I looked up and I thought, well, what on earth can that be? And it was a hanging effigy of my father. I thought, how could someone do that to my dad?
There were chants, get rid of Ireland, we need a new coach.
No, students were totally unhappy. They wanted him out. His job was in jeopardy because he was losing.
We played hard, but we didn't have a lot of talent. He had to start bringing new players in.
George Ireland had to confront all this stuff. He knew if he kept going the way he was going, he was done as a coach. The one thing about basketball is all you need is that backboard and hoop and a ball. In cities where there's a big population, not much space, well, it's a perfect game.
The best players in the country were from Harlem. They were playing a style of basketball that was up-tempo and fast-paced.
One of the best ways that I've heard it described is that old school basketball was played on the floor and modern basketball is played in the air.
It felt like the early style of basketball was like some sort of exercise in calisthenics, you know, people stretching, and there wasn't very much athleticism to it.
George Ireland was losing, teams weren't very good. We're playing staid, feet in the mud, in concrete basketball, and it's time to change. These black players were changing the game, and they were making it so exciting.
This was a time when superstars were heavily recruited. Wilt Chamberlain, Oscar Robertson, everybody knew who these guys were. A lot of coaches wanted them. But for the next tier of players down, black guys who were merely excellent basketball players, nobody wanted them.
For the black athlete, the landscape of these kids playing on university campuses or in the NBA just wasn't there. George Ireland was thinking about job security. He just wanted to win, and he didn't care who you were.
My father, Jerry Harkness, was born in Harlem, New York, and he lived in very harsh conditions in the projects. He's ultra competitive. And I've always wondered, where did that competitive drive come from? The resilience.
As a child in the 1940s, Jerry remembers his own father returning home from the war a hero. But the fanfare faded, and soon he was just a young black man trying to build a life.
He did everything to try to get work. The more Italian and Irish come in, the less work he would have. He could not take that pressure, and he left us. My mom was a go-getter, and she pretty much had to be when my dad left. And I could see her really trying to keep it all together.
The financial stress was overwhelming. At one point, his mother had a mental breakdown and admitted herself into Bellevue Hospital.
When she got out, I looked her in the eyes. I knew that we were going to be all right. She said, I'm going to get a job. We're going to make it. We're not going to depend on anybody but the three of us. To see her go through what she went through, I said, if she can do things like that, I can make it.
Young Jerry loved playing basketball on the streets of Harlem, but he never figured he was good enough to make his high school team. To him, the game was an escape. And when he'd save up a quarter, he'd go practice alone at the Y.
I could still see myself bouncing back and forth and then going up for the shot. Saying, good, we win. All of a sudden, a guy hit me on my shoulder. And he said, hey, you're pretty good. My eyes got wide, my mouth jumped open. It was my hero. Jackie Robinson. So when a guy like that tells me I'm not that bad, maybe he's right. I said, I'm going out for the team. My coach, he asked me, are you set for college? I said, no, I don't have any offers. He said, we're going to work on that. George Allen was coming up to Harlem to watch the ball players. My coach told him, there's a guy here that doesn't have the recognition the other players have because he only played 1 year. Why don't you give him a chance? So I was trying to impress this guy like he was the man that had my future, because this was pretty much my last chance. If I don't get this, I'm finished.
And that was the beginning of Jerry Harkness.
With Jerry joining the Ramblers, Coach Ireland developed a whole new vision for his team.
Jerry was a speedster.
My father was a great track athlete prior to becoming a basketball player.
We had to run 2 miles every day before practice because of Harkness, because he loved running.
I remember one coach said, put the ball on the floor, now pick it up. Jerry Harkness just scored a bucket.
Jerry was kind of in command. You could see the growth that was happening.
And that was the best season he had had in about 5 or 6 years. That saved him. And then we came along.
Ireland took me to a St. Rita's game. And I'm looking at the game and I said, I know why he got me here. He didn't tell me who he was scouting, but I was looking at these brothers, the center and the forward. They were 6'10". They were tough. At the end of the game, he said, what do you think of the little guard?
I was from St. Rita High School, born in Chicago. I loved basketball because I was good at it.
I said to myself, this guy is not a ball player. I was wrong about that.
Don't let Jack Egan's size fool you. He's incredibly athletic.
Jack Egan is no nonsense. He knows what he wants, and he is going to get it.
And it's important that you are not going to be intimidated. I needed some physical contact with the other team, even though it was basketball. I think I was fouled more often than anybody else.
Les Hunter and Vic Rouse both came from Nashville, Tennessee. I've heard Vic and Les be referred to as a package deal.
Mr. Ireland did not recruit Les Hunter. He recruited Vic Rouse. Vic Rouse said to him, if I come to your school, can Les come with us? He said, of course. He didn't realize he had a diamond.
Les Hunter may have been the most talented player on the team.
Vic and Les were the bigs. They brought that menacing, athletic height. Ronnie Miller came from New York, a very similar area that my father came from.
When Coach met my mother the first time, he completely ignored me. He promised that any kid that went to his school for 4 years would graduate.
George Ireland gave his sales pitch to the parents, not to the kid. The kid's looking to play big-time basketball. He probably wasn't going to go to Loyola University.
I was probably the best defensive player on the team, so I could guard someone that was bigger than me.
You had a group of extremely talented freshmen.
I had never played with such talented players before in my life.
I knew we had something special.
We lost one game as freshmen, and the word kind of spread throughout college basketball that Loyola had this excellent freshman class. Well, we move up to the varsity. The reality of big-time basketball kind of hit me in the face for the first time.
There was an unwritten rule that racialized who played.
How many black players can be played on the court at one time? 1 at home, 2 when you're away, and 3 when you're in a pinch. You need that little extra oomph. And it's not written anywhere. That's just kind of what the coaches knew.
The coaches, if they didn't want to put black players on the floor, they wouldn't have recruited them to begin with. But American higher education was overwhelmingly segregated. Your student body is 98% white. The faculty is 99% white. The alumni are 99.5% white. How many black guys can you put on the floor to represent this lily-white institution before you're going to run into blowback? How far could they go?
I value my job, I value my reputation, so I'm not going to push the system. I wonder how many coaches were just simply complying with the status quo.
Coach Ireland was careful. He'd bend the rule, but never break it. He consistently played 3 black starters at a time, but fearing the reaction of fans and university donors, he never played a 4th.
How George Ireland played us was when Jerry or Les Hunter would be in foul trouble or needed a break, I would go in for one of them. So I played, but I was not allowed to start, and he followed that the whole year.
These athletes were marginalized, and they didn't have the same privileges as their white teammates did. And it was openly practiced. It was openly practiced, and we didn't have any laws to protect individuals from this kind of behavior. In the North, Jim Crow segregation was practiced and was an unspoken rule, but not the law. But Jim Crow was the law in the South.
My absolute and unshakable stand for segregation of the races at all levels.
Ross Barnett was the governor of Mississippi at the time, rabid segregationist.
You gotta understand, Mississippi was incredibly racially volatile. If you even suggested something that included integration, it could be life-threatening. It was that bad.
In his fight to preserve segregation in the early 1960s, Governor Barnett made a special target out of state sports, denouncing any competition between white and black athletes. One team falling under his rule were the Mississippi State Bulldogs, led by Coach Babe McCarthy. For 3 of the previous 4 seasons, Mississippi State won the SEC championship, earning a spot in the NCAA tournament. And each time, Coach McCarthy did as he was told by the governor and turned it down.
We grew up doing what we were told to do. To not be able to go to the tournament, the attitude of some of the guys was, why do we even play? We only wanted to go for one reason, and that was to compete and be the best we could be.
When you think about Mississippi, you have to remember that the world was different, the country was different, and we had to deal with things differently. Racism in sports was not a new thing. It was a part of the life that we lived.
In 2001, I was a grad student at Loyola as an oral historian, and I started talking to the players, and I started hearing about their experiences. And I tied that into the context of what was happening in Chicago, because Chicago was then and is now quite a segregated city. What was it like for these guys?
One of the most surprising things that I have found out is things that were going on in the minds of my teammates that I did not know was going on in their mind then. In particular, someone who I'm very close to, Jerry Harkness. When I first met him, he was very standoffish. For more than a year, we had no relation.
It was a black team, and the kids from St. Rita treated my mom's school terribly.
She told me that St. Rita's was racist and they would throw garbage cans at you. I just drew a conclusion on him early on.
I grew up in a neighborhood that was all white. It was mostly Irish, Polish, and Italian.
Marquette Park was known as the neighborhood that most vehemently resisted the housing initiatives that Martin Luther King came to Chicago to promote. It was a place where blacks were not welcome. You could be chased down and even beaten.
I've been in many demonstrations all across the South, but I can say that I have never seen, even in Mississippi and Alabama, mobs as hostile and as hate-filled as I've seen here in Chicago.
When I would go home from Loyola University to go back to my neighborhood on the South Side, a lot of my friends had the same kind of notion that the black players on the team needed me because I was the brains of the outfit. You know who is? Les Hunter.
There's always been stereotypes about black athletes, that they are all athlete, very little smarts.
African-American players were described as tremendous athletes, a physical specimen, whereas a lot of the white players were described as crafty, smart. You didn't have to be that aware to know what they were trying to say.
Of all the players at the center of this story, I never had the chance to meet Les Hunter or Vic Rouse. Vic died in 1999, and Les passed away during the making of this film. In many ways, Les and Vic embodied Loyola at their best. Les was the team's top player, and Vic was their top student. And when Les missed a shot, Vic was there to tip it in. For me, team chemistry is everything, but you have to earn that trust. That was true for Jack and Jerry. But in Les and Vic, the Ramblers always had an example to follow.
The program had been under fire. I saw an opportunity to be a part of the resurgence. You have Loyola that no one had ever paid attention to before. If we're going to compete nationally, what we have to do is get past race.
We weren't ranked. We weren't a team that people were looking at. We were an independent school, so we weren't the preseason pick for anything.
In the 1961-62 season, Ireland no longer had to rely on Jerry's speed alone. Now, his whole team could run.
Almost immediately, we developed this style of a rebound, a pass, and a basket.
Get down and score before the defense had a chance to set up. That's all it was. And that's run and gun basketball.
Ireland believed in playing his starters a long time.
In the 61-62 season, the team consisted of Egan and a guy named Mike Gavin, Jerry Harkness, Les Hunter, and Vic Rouse. Ireland's coaching style with that team was just standing aside and letting them run. His genius as a coach was to just let them play their game.
In the pros, they call it a motion offense, where someone is always moving. If you didn't stay with us, we would score an easy basket.
The Ramblers had some games in the South, and they ran into some of the hard truths of U.S. race relations.
The famous trip to New Orleans, where George Ireland at the last minute told us that we would not be able to stay together as a team.
The black ball players stayed in Algiers in private homes, while the white players stayed in New Orleans in hotels.
And he said he didn't know about it until the last minute. And I never believed that. We land in New Orleans, and the black guys, all of us jump into a cab. And Ireland gets in the cab with us. And it was a black driver, and he said, "Sir, you're gonna have to get out of my cab. It's against the law for a white person to drive in a cab with black people." And Ireland said, "Well, I'll pay the fine if you get stopped." The driver said, "You don't understand. It's not the fine, I will go to jail." That's how bad it was in 1962.
When we played Loyola of New Orleans, the shock hit us. They had a roped off section for coloreds.
You couldn't talk back, you couldn't fight back, there was nothing you could do about it.
But you could express that anger by taking it out on the other squad. The court was an equalizer.
After the game, the black players went off to Algiers, and I can honestly say that was by far the best trip that we had. We had no curfew parties that night, and the people in the community were so proud of us, they treated us like kings.
They sent us 2 brand new Pontiacs to drive. We had a great time, and we felt so sorry for the white guys.
But in contrast, what it took us to get to that point, I felt offended by some of the things that occurred.
After the game, Ireland made headlines denouncing New Orleans' segregation laws, vowing that the team would never return. But just a day later, the truth came out. Prior to Loyola's trip, another school in New Orleans, Xavier University, offered to house the entire team. This rare break from the Jim Crow laws governing the city would have allowed all the white and black players to stay together as usual. But for reasons that were never made clear, Ireland declined and chose instead to keep the team segregated. When I heard this story from the players, I couldn't believe it. It's crazy to me that any coach would choose to separate their team anywhere for any reason. It's not just unsafe, it's bad strategy. Your team is your family.
We had to deal not only with the racism of the South when we would travel down there, we also had to deal with it to some degree right here at our home court.
When you think about the Loyola story, you inevitably come to a very complex topic.
We all kind of knew our place. It doesn't sound right when you say that. It sounds terrible when you say that. I just mean that as people, we kind of knew what we had to do to survive.
They wanted us to be available as tokens. For example, if they had a party on campus, they wanted us to stand on the walls, and be there. But we weren't supposed to dance with the girls, we weren't supposed to talk with the girls. And if they came to us and asked us to dance, we even had Jesuit priests who said, "No, you don't do that."
The priests had a job, and part of their job was making sure the students were safe. And unfortunately, the black male body has often been considered, just by existing, unsafe.
I guess I expected to hear the 63 guys face discrimination when traveling south, or maybe even on the court by opponents. But to know they were also disrespected at home makes me furious. And on a call between our two teams, we got an opportunity to talk about it.
Then I remember, and the other guys will remember this, we could not go to the barber shop right across Sheridan Road. They would not cut black guys' hair.
You couldn't get a haircut on campus? Like you had to go somewhere else to get a haircut?
I guess, again, I was blind to what they were experiencing, just assumed everything was great.
In the 60s, we didn't express ourselves because I really don't think we knew how to talk about it.
You know, the average person might look at it and say, that's not racism, but it is.
They're going to have to swallow their discontent. They're going to have to swallow their hurts, because the moment they start making waves, the moment they start asking for things that they know they should have, they're no longer just these wonderfully respectable young men that we would be so happy to have amongst us. There was a mold that they needed to fit. Not the angry team, not the frustrated. They were classy. And oh, look, how acceptable they are. That might be why they're not loud and they're not vocal.
It makes you feel completely isolated. It is a very hard thing to face. What you say is nothing, what you think is nothing. That's what it feels like to be discriminated against. You're invisible. You don't exist. You don't exist.
Toward the end of the season, Ron Miller began playing a more prominent role in the team. He was scoring a lot, and at one point, Ireland pulled him aside to tell him why he wasn't starting. And he didn't really tell him. He said, but you understand what it is. And Miller did understand. Ireland didn't want to have the fourth black guy on the court.
It was so obvious to everyone around the team and everyone at Loyola that we should have had 4 blacks starting. You keep in mind, I'm coming off the bench, and I was averaging double figures. So that tells you that maybe I should have been starting.
The one white boy that he was starting over Ron Miller had no business starting, and he knew it, and everyone knew it.
In 1962, Loyola went 21-3, earning a bid to the National Invitation Tournament at Madison Square Garden in New York. With 2 Harlem natives on his team, Ireland saw an opportunity to lure the next generation of local recruits.
We had advanced to the semis playing Dayton. And what really surprised me was that Coach Ireland changed the lineup.
He wanted to start me because he was recruiting heavy out of New York City. Local papers made a big deal that I was coming back to Madison Square Garden. 2 New York kids, me and Jerry Harkness.
So he has to play Miller and he has to play me because we're in New York. So he takes out 6'8", 6'9" Hunter.
He brought Miller in for Les Hunter, best ball player on the team. Dayton was a hell of a team, and we were getting beat up pretty bad.
Take out Les Hunter and we're smaller, much smaller. It just put us in a bad situation.
Ron Miller was the Ramblers' high scorer in the game, but without Hunter in the lineup, Loyola was just outmatched.
So we lost to them. We had to play another game after that, which was a consolation game, and we played Duquesne University, which was a very good basketball school in those days.
And you have to remember that Mr. Ireland was in difficulty. He could not afford to lose.
Ireland was not trying to be an activist. George Ireland was thinking about winning ball games.
And that was a game where Ireland chose not to play the senior, Mike Gavin, and inserted Ron Miller as the other guard.
He put the best team on the court.
He broke the code.
When we won the consolation game, from there on, he played 4 black guys.
On that historic night, the Iron Five were born. For the Loyola Ramblers, there would be no turning back.
Let me ask you this, do you ever get crank phone calls?
Well, they criticize who he's got on his team. As you know, he has a Negro ball club, and we get letters on that.
Well, that's terrible. the rest of the world could take a cue from on integration is how well these kids get along together on the basketball floor.
That's right.
With his new starting five set for the 1962-63 season, there was plenty of fallout for George Ireland and his family. But with his eyes on a national title, the coach had come too far to turn back. Meanwhile, there was another team down south with their eyes on the title.
I was always fascinated about the psychology of the Mississippi State basketball team. You're feeling a lot of pressure if your programs aren't performing well, if you're losing. The irony is that Mississippi State was winning, and the more they won, the more pressure they faced.
Our governor in particular just didn't think we ought to be playing against black players. We never imagined that we would get to go to the NCAA tournament in '63.
Young people are often a product of a dysfunctional situation, taught things that they shouldn't be taught, and it's not until they actually experience a different set of circumstances that they can appreciate what should be.
In Mississippi, if you opposed Governor Barnett and the racism of Jim Crow laws, you were all but guaranteed a prison sentence. Or maybe even worse, with the state's long history of lynchings. But despite those very real threats, just 100 miles from the Mississippi State campus, there was someone still brave enough to fight back.
The enrollment of James Meredith, the first African-American to attend on the campus of Ole Miss. That night, a riot broke out. Hundreds were injured. 2 people died as protesters tried to stop a black man from attending a tax-supported state school.
James Meredith, who was a Mississippi native and a veteran, applied to enter the University of Mississippi Ole Miss. Ross Barnett said that Meredith would enter Ole Miss over his dead body.
His admission caused a riot of such magnitude, the president called out the National Guard troops to come put the riot down.
Immediately following the mass panic, the college infirmary was besieged with injured persons, officers, and students.
People died. It's hard to believe that ever happened, but it damn sure did.
As the dust settled after the riots, James Meredith successfully enrolled at Ole Miss, another small piece of progress in the civil rights movement. And while figures like Babe McCarthy were left to grapple with what it meant on his campus, back in Chicago, they were listening too.
Things were starting to change, but not rapidly enough. We would sit up in my room around this radio, listening and cheering for people who were doing things to make a difference.
We were in the middle of the civil rights movement and Dr. King. The emphasis was put on them, but we in the background were making changes too.
We really started the season with not just a good team, but a great team. We had 7 guys who legitimately could start.
They were the highest scoring team in the country that year. They knew exactly what the next step of the other was going to be.
There was something electric that happened to us. We just knew that we were going to be very good.
They were bulldozing teams. No one could stop them.
In retaliation to all of this resistance, they ran up the scores. Send a message. We're good, and we're good at what we do.
Is this the best team you've had in your 12 years as Loyola coach?
Well, Mike, I think this is my best team.
Well, there's no question about it. You certainly do have an excellent team. In fact, you must be ranked 2nd in the nation. George Ireland, how do you think that your Loyola club would make out against Cincinnati?
Well, that's a hard question. We are an offensive team and Cincinnati a defensive team. I would like to play Cincinnati, and possibly sometime we will.
For such a long period of time, we knew that somewhere along the way, we were going to go up against Cincinnati. They were the big dogs. We were the underdogs.
Cincinnati had become a machine, a real machine under the leadership of Ed Jucker.
Cincinnati was the complete opposite of Loyola. Cincinnati had won 2 championships with a very deliberate, slow-down pace. When you talk about a team that wanted to make 4 passes before they took a shot, Cincinnati probably wanted to make 6 passes. something that was not in our DNA at all.
While Loyola was the fastest team in college basketball, no one matched the slow, tactical pace of Cincinnati. At a time when more and more teams experimented with running the ball, Ed Jucker found success by doing just the opposite.
Don't shoot unless you have a good shot. Hold the ball if you need to once in a while. That was before the days of shot clock.
Everyone thought he was crazy until he won his first NCAA championship. They thought he was lucky until he won his second.
When they got ahead of you by 10 points, you were probably toast.
Combined with the talents of Tom Thacker, Ron Bonham, and George Wilson, Cincinnati was set to be the first ever team to win 3 consecutive titles.
We had the best record. I don't know what Loyola was, but they didn't win as many games as we did.
I mean, Cincinnati was the monster. Why would you think that this small Catholic school could beat Cincinnati?
Out of everything I learned about this story, I was most surprised by Cincinnati. Because for all the praise given to Ireland for breaking that unwritten rule, I didn't know that Ed Jucker broke it first, months before Ireland, winning a national championship with 4 black starters in 1962. You might say it was easier for Cincinnati since they were already defending national champs. But I think it's more likely that 4 black starters with a slow, controlled game were less threatening than Loyola's aggressive, fast break players. Whatever the explanation is, these 2 trailblazing teams seem to be on a clear path to the championship. But the season was far from over, and Loyola's future was suddenly uncertain.
Midway through the season, Loyola lost 3 players. One of them left for financial reasons. The other 2 were New York playground guys. They didn't make grades and would have got a lot of playing time had they stayed on the team.
Everyone was understandably shocked when all that happened at once. We had 9 players, and that was it. It was so awkward just to have scrimmages and you have 9 people.
Their absence is one of the reasons that the 5 starters were playing virtually every minute.
The Iron Five were used to playing nonstop, but now, even when Loyola took big leads, Ireland refused to give any of them a break.
Some of the games were complete blowouts. We would still be playing. I mean, we'd be up by 15, 20 points, and he would still have all of us in the game.
We had a 30-point lead at halftime. Man, almost be playing. Never got in.
That starting 5, I think he was nervous when any one of them was off of the floor. And it wasn't that we were incapable of contributing. People don't realize how good we were because they never saw us. We'd be up 35, 40 points. Let's give the first team a break.
I was feeling badly because we had guys on the bench that weren't getting in. And I said, Coach, take me out, I'm tired. He said, stay in.
Trust me, I can tell you, being on the court 40 minutes straight is no joke. To play that fast-paced style every game without a sub, that can break you. And that season, as the exhaustion built on the court, the pressure got to everyone.
We were in New York playing St. John's. Jerry Lyon came out and says, George is on the table, he's coughing up blood. You know, he had a bleeding ulcer.
You know, there were times when guys out there on that floor were hurting. They had been injured. Vic Rouse had had a shoulder separation, and they would have to put it back in and tape it up. When you run a team for 30 games, you know, iron wears out. We tried to figure out why certain things happened, why certain things didn't happen. But we loved each other. 5 guys were going to play, and the other 4 were going to be supportive of them.
Worn down, Loyola suffered their only 2 defeats of the season late in the schedule. The struggle for the Iron Five was increasing, but the worst was yet to come.
The game was in Houston, Texas.
To me, we were just going down to play another team. That's how naive and ignorant I was back then. It was a pretty small, confined gym. It didn't take long to realize that it was going to be more than a basketball game.
Things started to unravel.
I believe everybody in the stadium was against us.
The fans were out of control.
Go back home. Get out of here. We're gonna get you.
They used the N-word constantly, threw ice, threw things at us on the court.
The students throwing stuff. I mean, they look like me.
Never having experienced that side of racism, literally they're spitting on us. This is what you guys go through on a daily basis?
I looked to the side, I didn't see police, and I started to worry.
There were times during that game that we feared for our lives. It was that bad.
All of a sudden, we heard a loud bang. I swear to God, I thought they were shooting at us. Somebody took a popcorn bag and popped it.
That was one of the worst experiences on the court that we experienced as a team. This is when we talk about Coach George Ireland. To me, he should have known that. He should not have put us in those situations. If he cared, he would not have put us in those situations.
Coach Ireland had a lot of power. And I'm not just talking about the power to play the starters the entire game. He had the power to say, this is a segregated city and things might be a little scary for you, but you're gonna play anyway. And maybe they would have chosen to play anyway. But we don't know that because they didn't have a choice.
Through all the highs and lows of that season, the game at Houston left the most lasting impression on the team. But they won the game, and for the first time ever, Loyola accepted their invitation to the NCAA tournament. The Iron Five were about to face a whole new level of public scrutiny, and there was nowhere to hide from what was coming.
We get the mail. On the outside, it was KKK. You don't belong on the same floor as white players. We're gonna kill you. And I'm gonna tell you, I was scared to death. They know where I live. They're gonna come to the dorm and get me. I called Alan. I said, Alan, you gotta get over here. And he went to the front desk of the dorm. Any mail that comes in for the ball players, give it to me.
My dad would keep the mail from them. He did not want them to read some of the things that were sent. Dad would show it to us at home. I just could not believe any human beings would send stuff like this to 19, 20-year-old kids.
I've heard stories of the letters that he received, but I've personally never seen any of the letters. I believe that he did receive letters.
I was never able to get to the letters. In my mind, I had to put the letters out of my book because I couldn't prove them.
There's 3 like this that are all closed up. And up in the corner, it says Loyola, HM for hate mail. The way they were signed, Uncle Tom and KKK, the N-word. He said he wanted me to have it because he knew I would protect it. And he said, someday, this history will be alive again, and maybe then you can show it. He knew it was the wrong thing to do, but he could not let this keep coming to his ball players. I thought, if I can just protect them, who needs to know about this stuff? It happened, it's here, and I promised Dad that I would protect it.
It's tempting to hide the worst parts of our histories, to lock them away, pretend they don't exist. Maybe for Ireland, these letters were seen as a burden on the players, a distraction at the height of their season. Maybe it was easiest to just move past them. But the problem is, Ireland didn't. Among those letters were threats so severe he hired security for his daughters, a protection he never offered his players.
I don't think he thought at all about race relations. I don't think he was interested in race relations. I think George Ireland was thinking about himself, his family, and winning basketball games. I always accepted that as a part of the times. I never held that part against him. It was important to him that he was successful, and by being good to us, it made him successful.
Even through the death threats, the Loyola players found a way to stay focused. The NCAA tournament was fast approaching, and Cincinnati was still expected to win it all. Though it looked like the bracket would have one glaring omission.
Mississippi State defeated Ole Miss to clinch the Southeastern Conference Championship, which gave them the automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. The next day, Governor Barnett issued a statement that Mississippi State will not be playing in the NCAA tournament.
Personally, I feel it is not for the best interest of Mississippi State University or either of the races.
The governor had issued an injunction.
We will do all we can to the point of arresting you when you get ready to leave the state of Mississippi.
The NCAA had no idea where to put State in their seeding because they didn't know if State was going to be able to make it, even though they had verbally committed.
Mississippi State was given a first-round bye. Their first opponent would be the winner of Loyola versus Tennessee Tech.
People don't realize the amount of pressure that we were under, not only from the KKK and the White Knights, but from our own people. Blacks across the country who were putting their hopes on us, that we had to win because the black community was counting on us.
Jerry said that he had black people calling him saying, hey, you better not lose to those white boys.
Come on, you guys, we're rooting for you. We're rooting for you. We got so roused up that you're gonna be hard to beat. You're gonna be very hard to beat. The first game was against Tennessee Tech, an all-white team. And that poor team, we went up 30, 40. We beat them, and it's still a record. 69 points.
The final score of that game is still the greatest disparity in NCAA history.
I mean, it's just amazing the advantage you have once you're motivated and roused up.
The Ramblers were eager for their next matchup, but with no word from Mississippi State, Loyola had no idea if they'd show up.
Their coaches said we're going. Their president says that we're going. But everybody else in power in the state says, no, you can't. These are guys who were raised to honor authority, to obey their elders.
You know, we faced jail time if we failed to obey the injunction.
The night before the trip, Coach McCarthy did have a team meeting. We talked. He said, here's what we're going to do.
We had to leave early the next morning, as early as we could, and we headed out.
The team was going to split into two teams. One was the decoy team.
They sent our trainer and 6 of our players that didn't play a whole lot out to the airport.
They keep the 5 starters and the 6th man back at the dorm room.
There are 2 airports in Starkville, and as a decoy, one group was going to Bryan Field.
They went out there to see if there was going to be an officer to serve the injunction.
In that case, the trainer with the decoys was going to phone back to campus, tell the starting team, don't come to the airport. They had another plane waiting for them at another airport that they were going to take if they had to.
And should 6 be arrested, 6 will end up in East Lansing, Michigan.
It was like Mission Impossible, man.
We were kind of the guinea pigs, okay? I was literally scared to death, but we were gonna go.
The reserves made it through to the airport. A call was made and they said coast is clear. And the starters, Joe Dan and Red Stroud and Doug Hutt, they went and they all flew together.
And as soon as the plane left the ground, you could hear the guys all together started clapping and cheering. We're off, we're on our way.
I didn't think they were going to come. And when we got to Michigan, they said Mississippi State is going to play you.
To know that cops are chasing them and that what they're doing is going to create a stir, and then just even getting psychologically ready for an NCAA tournament game, which they had never done before, I'm sure they were probably tapped out.
How many people are going to support us being there? We don't know.
Everything was very quiet. We're all sitting there, you know, about halfway wanting to cry.
And when we got on the floor that night, all of a sudden, the MSU fight song was played. Here we are, a bunch of white kids in opposition to a movement against black athletes, to play something as easy or simple as a basketball game, to walk into a gym of 15, 18,000 people. Wow. Could it really be happening?
They had no clue that they would be that welcomed.
Joe Dan Gold was our captain, and he went out to shake hands before the tip-off.
There was no cheering. The place was quiet. Everybody was watching us. You could feel it. I didn't hear anything the referees were saying. I was looking at Joe Dan, and he was looking at me. We both went to shake hands, and the place lit up. Pow, pow, pow.
Cameras just went crazy.
Almost turned into daylight.
I mean, everybody understood how important that moment was. It was captured for the ages.
I said, this is more than a game. This is history.
For our 2 captains to shake hands and acknowledge the fact that, hey, we're here.
The night would forever be known as the Game of Change. When the final buzzer sounded, Loyola had earned the win, sending them to the Elite Eight, while Mississippi State faced the reality of returning home and the consequences that would be waiting.
I don't know, we could have played a whole lot of games, probably never beaten them. Coach came in, and that's the first thing he said, popped in that door, boys, you get your head up. He said, y'all have done something that nobody in Mississippi's ever done. You know, y'all have nothing to be ashamed of.
Well, obviously our flight home was a disappointing flight home. Yet, it wasn't disappointing because we had accomplished what we set out to do.
The Mississippi State team didn't know what they would find when they got home. That was the danger. That was the element that they were dealing with. It had to be in the back of their minds the whole time. They get back to Mississippi, and there's a crowd treating them like heroes. You know, the best thing is to win. The second best thing is to lose. That means you got a chance to compete. Without the ability to compete, you've got nothing.
Differences of opinion that we have and ill feelings that we have, but basketball and sports can do an awful lot to bring people together.
As the NCAA tournament continued, Loyola defeated Illinois and Duke to advance to the national championship game for the first time in school history. The most anticipated contest of the season, Loyola versus Cincinnati, was set.
The night we beat Duke, what I remember most vividly is Vic Rouse jumping on the bed at 4 o'clock in the morning saying he's gonna be looking at his NCAA watch. I remember that vividly because they didn't give out rings at that time, they gave out watches. I don't think any of the guys got to bed till at least 4 in the morning. And that might have been, the guys might have been dragging a little bit.
NCAA championship ball games in the ding-dong dilly of a battle tonight at Louisville, as we will have the Bearcats coached by Ed Jucker against the Ramblers coached by George Ireland of Loyola of Chicago.
For the first time in NCAA history, 7 black starters across both teams took the floor. And in a nationally televised game, the entire country was watching. On Chicago local radio, Loyola's very own announcer, Red Rush, was calling the game. A voice no one would forget by the end of the night.
We are hungry for a championship, so please bring one home to us, won't you?
It was bringing chills to me, to be honest with you, watching it.
We had 150 young nuns there looking at this little black and white TV so we could watch that game.
Probably the audience at the time was pro-Cincinnati. Nobody had won 3 titles in a row.
I guess the excitement starts when you're running out through the crowded area. I could not see anybody that I knew there, but I knew they were there. Okay, there was that many people. It felt as though I've been looking forward to this all my life. I would say more excited, somewhat nervous, but more excited. I just said, well, we got to get to a good start.
At tip-off, I had this little habit where I always reach down and touch my sock. And that night, I didn't touch my sock, which said to me, I must have been nervous.
The ball's in the air and controlled by Cincinnati's Tony Yates. So the Bearcats have got the ball on the move. He brings the ball over the 10-second timeline. The Bearcats control down here to Bonhams, drives the baseline, jumps, shoots, off, no good. And Wilson stuffs it through. George Wilson went high in the sky and stuffed it through.
We were the best team, without a doubt. Deliberate game, set picks, take our time with the ball.
Right at tip-off, Cincinnati had momentum on their side. Both teams studied their opponent, their styles, tactics, and their biggest threat.
Harkness out to Ron Miller. They're going to try to set the pattern. They're not going in that full court press, incidentally.
Tom Thacker, the best defensive player in college basketball at the time. At the beginning of the game, I said, I'm going to get in his head.
He was going in for what he thought was an easy layup. He thought he had Tom Thacker beat.
Instead of going left, where I know they had scouted me and I go left 90% of the time, I said, I'm gonna go right on him.
They're going to try to set the pattern. There goes Harkness driving the baseline, and the ball knocked out of bounds by Tom Thacker, who is on Harkness.
He slapped the ball away. I could not believe what he had just done. Nobody would think of it as being awesome except me. He knocked me out of my game.
From that moment on, he was afraid of Thacker. Thacker was in his head.
Being guarded by Thacker. Harkness goes off the left side, jumps an 8-footer off, no good, and Wilson clears the backboard, backing up underneath.
When I got around him, there's George Wilson. They had a double where they had me boxed in.
Down to Harkness. Harkness has yet to score. We're going to see what happens. He backs up. He always shoots when he does. Let's wait. He turns around, jumps, shoots off, no good, and the ball knocked into the hands of Wilson.
They had all of the things to stop me. They just scouted us very, very well.
Off to Miller to the right-hand side, goes to the baseline, jumps an 8-footer off, no good. So Ron Miller has got a foul.
We'd had slow starts before, but this night, something is wrong.
With the threat of Jerry Harkness neutralized, Ed Jucker turned his attack on what Loyola relied on most: their speed.
Passing over to Bonham, behind the free throw lane, it is off the iron, no good, and Miller controls it off of there. They slow down that fast break, 9:56 left to go in the first half.
They took away our fast breaks.
We wanted to cut loose all the time. We wanted to get the ball and go and get the ball and go. They didn't take enough shots for us to get going. They were never in a hurry to take a shot.
Thacker way over. Hands it back to Larry Singleton. They have a 7-point lead, and when Cincinnati's got that kind of a lead, it's pretty tough.
So they didn't miss a lot of shots. So there were not an opportunity for us to get rebounds. And for some reason, we could not ever adjust to that style. I don't remember having a fast break in the first half.
We just never could get started. And we weren't shooting well. Shooting percentage was terrible.
The Ramblers, a 13-footer up off, no good. Over to Miller, jumping from behind the free throw lane. It is up and short, no good, and Thacker clears it.
How could we miss that many shots? I mean, there were easy shots, there were wide open shots, and we were missing shots.
I knew that we were much better than we were playing. A lot of people were probably watching at home, and we come there and flop.
Everyone on that team was nervous. We were out of sync largely because our leader was not having a good half.
Jerry did not feel confident. If Jerry was not confident, the rest of the team had to wonder what's to become of us.
Miller over to Harkness. He goes down near the baseline. Bonham's on him. Dribbles under, fakes, shoots, and he is knocked down. But getting the ball. Egan sets. He shoots. It is rolling off. No good. Over to Ron Miller. He jumps. He shoots a 6-footer. Rolls off. No good. And the ball is knocked out of bounds. Last touch by Vic Krause. At halftime, the score is 29-21.
The assumption by everybody is that this is a gimme. Cincinnati's got it. It's in the bag.
The first half of the championship game is kind of a blur. I remember Jerry had a very bad game, but so did everyone else. We played the worst game of the year. Of the 4 years that I was around Ireland, I've often thought that George Ireland's greatest achievement as a coach was what he said at halftime. He walks into the locker room and said to us, you know, you just played the worst half of basketball I think we've played all year. And he says, I'm not worried about it. We're going to go out there the second half, and you're going to play better, and we'll win the game. There are other times when we would be winning by 10, 12, 15 points, and he would come into the locker room and he would start throwing things around, telling us how lousy we were playing. But at this moment, that night, he was the complete opposite of all of those. He said, we're better than that. You're better than that. He said, we'll get in the second half. I've often felt that was his finest hour.
The ball is up and controlled by Jerry Harkness over near the sideline. Back to Miller, the ball goes. Back down to Harkness on the right side. Going inside the free throw lane, shoots up, and it goes off to Rouse. He scores as he controls the board.
I never heard anyone say they had lost their hope. But if you were watching that game, you had to think things are not going our way, and I don't see how they're going to change.
Bolstered by their coach's confidence, Loyola came out of the half ready to fight, but Cincinnati looked just as strong as they started. With Jerry still held at bay, the Bearcats kept the pace slow, making it even harder to catch up.
Yates has got it over the far side to Larry Singleton. Larry down in the corner to Bonham. He jumps, an 18-footer is up and good. 45-30. Cincinnati leading by 15 points. You wouldn't believe it unless you were here. Here comes
I'm thinking to myself, how do we make this comeback? How do we do it?
Cincinnati was about the best defensive team in the United States. So how do you overcome that deficit?
It's a long, hard hill to climb, but maybe there's some life in them yet.
And Rouse clears the backboard for Loyola.
Take the deep breath and you wait for your time to hit.
47-34, 13-point lead. Here's Ron Miller going down to the baseline, jumps, shoots, scores! Going in the lane, backhand pass, it goes to Harkness, the baseline, jump, off, no good, he can't get it. Rouse gets the rebound, turn around, jump.
It was about 5 minutes to go in the game. I hadn't scored a basket.
Shoots up off, no good, and Leslie Hunter clears it. There they go, Harkness, and the ball is stolen as Harkness passes it stolen by Larry Singleton. Beautiful interception by Larry.
Loyola was battling every possession, but still down 7, every miss made it painfully clear. If Jerry Harkness couldn't score, Loyola was finished.
Jerry had a big dream, had big ideas about his friends at home watching him on TV, how this was going to be triumph of the poor, be triumphant back in New York, and he saw all that slipping away.
I would not have been able to face myself in life because I played so bad. I would have felt bad for the rest of my life. But God has always put me in a situation growing on welfare, nothing to eat. And I think of my mom getting us through, coming out of the hospital and telling us, we're going to make it. I realized that all of that drive and determination came from my mom. Ireland put in a different play that Cincinnati had not seen. I felt finally, maybe this is it for me.
Egan into Harkness, turnaround jumper's good! Jerry made his first basket! He made it! He might do it! 48-43! 48-43!
We can win this game. At that point, we can win.
Here's Thacker with that ball. Passing down, intercepted by Harkness. Here goes Jerry, lays it up, and he scores! Harkness scores! Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful! 48-45, 4:16 left to go. Oh, is this a ball game now? Out to Harkness on the left side, he's driving down, he's under, lays it up, and scores! He scores! He scores!
Jerry was the primary reason that we were able to come back and get into the game. Once he heated up, the rest of the team followed suit.
We just started playing harder, much harder.
Look at Hunter get that ball. Miller on the right side, a bounce pass into Hunter, turnaround layup, and oh, goaltending, goaltending, they finally called it. It's 51-50.
The crowd started to come around because we started to close the gap.
Here comes Harkness. He lays it up, and it is tipped in by Hunter. 19 seconds, 15 seconds, 16. Singleton's got it, and a foul. Harkness fouled him purposely. He had to do it.
12 seconds to play, and it's Bedlam here in Louisville, Kentucky. 53-52, Cincinnati by one single point, and going to the line will be Larry Singleton.
Larry Singleton was one of the best free throw shooters in the nation. So, you know, when he stepped to the line, my heart sank.
With 12 seconds to go, Singleton will go to the line. If he should miss, they would have time, of course, to go down the court and perhaps take that one shot. And Tom, anything can happen at this point.
I am out there praying as if he hits both, over. No doubt about it. The game is over.
Well, there's 54 to 52.
I said, dear Lord, please, please, just give us a chance.
Larry Shingleton with only his second point of the night. And now perhaps he can ice the ball game for them. It's short, and it comes off to Loyola.
Les gets the rebound, perfect position. And as a guy from Cincinnati swipes at the ball, as Les passes the ball to me. And as I catch the ball, I take one dribble and I see Jerry streaking toward the basket. I saw him break. I knew he could get his shot because that's his spot.
Jerry did what he does best. He cocked that left hand behind his head.
I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel the ball leave my hand. If I would have had an air ball, I wouldn't have been surprised. I just let it go.
No good, and Leslie Hunter has got it. To Ron Miller, they got a fast break down to Harkness. He jumps, he shoots. He scores! He scores! He scores! He scores!
Perfect fast break within seconds. And that to me was who Loyola was. That's how we played, just like that.
1 second to go, and we're going into overtime. And the score is all time, 54 to 54. The clock is running with 9 seconds. Harkness takes it. He makes it. It's all tied up.
There was some controversy that Ronnie Miller might have gotten away with a traveling call.
That's true. I gotta say it.
There's the run. He did an extra step.
They know what they did. They know what happened.
It was so close that nobody in their mind as a referee are gonna call that.
And there was no question in my mind he walked.
Did he get away with something? Nah. They didn't blow a whistle.
I didn't travel because the ref didn't call it.
And the baskets made, we're into overtime.
It is absolutely a madhouse here, and it's all tied 54-54. Loyola getting 33 points in the second half, Cincinnati getting 25, and Jerry Harkness, who had perhaps his most miserable night in his college career, came back to become the hero to tie it up with 3 seconds to go.
But when David comes up against Goliath, what can you do? There it goes, down to Harkness. He's underneath, he lays it up. He scores! He scores! 56 to 54. It's the Dilly as the Ramblers are out in front for the first time in this ball game.
What I remember most about the last 5 minutes was that desperation. Keep crawling until the bitter end, and something good will happen.
Thacker trying to get one inside. He does to Wilson, and Wilson scores.
Imagine playing an entire game without any break and an overtime. Those guys had no time to rest. They were constantly going. All 5.
They have gone all the way without a substitute. And I'm wondering, Tom Hamlin, if this isn't beginning to wear on Loyola a little bit.
As you get tired, you lose your legs, you lose your shot. A lot of things go south.
Les Hunter takes his shot. It rolls around and goes off. And George Wilson grabs it for the Bearcats.
At one time, one of the guys came out and said, "Chuck, I'm gassed." Well, coach said, "Go out there, keep playing."
Somebody maybe needs a sub, but you don't want to tinker with that moment. No substitutions. That's what it's going to be.
The lead pass intercepted by Ron Miller. Ron Miller intercepted the pass. Now the Ramblers have got it. Action? You better believe it. Miller shoots a 20-footer. Good! Good by Ron Miller.
The final minutes of overtime felt like a tug of war. 2 teams desperate to win, both on the verge of collapse. They'd do anything to score, even if it meant taking a play from the other side.
To Cincinnati, a long pass to Shingleton. He's in the clear. He ties it up. 58 to 58. A minute and a half to go. Egan almost loses it. They'll have to jump for it. Egan and Shingleton, the 2 smallest men on the court, will jump for it.
Jack has no quit in him. The fact that Shingleton was a little taller, didn't make a difference.
Shingleton is 5'10", and Egan is 5'9", so Cincinnati with a slight height advantage. Believe me, this is a very important jump.
Jack would fight anybody. I mean, he didn't care who you were. If you had the ball, he's going to fight you to take the ball.
I don't care if the guy was 6'8". That's the way Jack is.
Ball is up and tipped back to Ron Miller. He's got it. Over to Jerry Harkness.
I think it was a misfiring on Singleton's part, because he was up too soon before the ball could be reached. And Jack timed it perfectly. Luckily, the Irish.
Back to Egan, 1:15. What would you do? 58-58, would you go for the one?
I think everyone knew that the idea was to get the ball to Jerry Harkness for the last shot.
So we're going to try to get the ball to Jerry, and he should be taking a shot with 3-4 seconds left, so there's a chance for a tip-in, a rebound, but not an opportunity for them to get a rebound and go all the way down the court. How do we do it?
They're going to go for one. I don't think there's any question about it. 50 seconds, 49, 48. Harkness backing in. He may go. Now he goes back out to Egan. Egan has got the ball. Looking around, over to Harkness, back to Egan. 38 seconds left to go. To Rouse, back to Miller. They're going to go for the one shot, 58-58. And this is a twist. Cincinnati, the team that always holds the ball. They're seeing what it feels like now.
The team that normally held the ball did not know what to do when someone held the ball against them.
Egan over to Harkness. Harkness going inside the lane. Now he goes back out to Miller. 15 seconds. Out to Egan. I guarantee you one thing, they'll give it to Harkness when it's time.
Everybody pretty much thought it would come to me.
Miller's got it. Out to Rouse. 9, 8. Harkness has got it. Here he goes.
And I got the ball, and he knew I was going left, and I knew it. But I didn't feel it. In the corner of my eye, I saw Hunter open, and he could hit that shot.
Threw it to Les. Now we're talking probably 3 or 4 seconds.
I got nervous, not because Les isn't a great shot, but I heard the ball scratch as he took that shot. He scratched it with his fingernails.
It was a good shot to take.
It went off the side of the rim, and then one of the second best, third best moment of my life was seeing Vic push that ball back through the basket.
Off the rim. Rouse gets it, scores. It's over. It's over. We won. We won. We won the ball game. We won the ball game. Oh, we won. Loyola won the ball game. Oh, we won it. We won. 60-58. 60-58. Rouse gets it, scores. It's over. It's over. We won. We won. We won. We won.
We won.
And all of a sudden we heard these voices march down Sheridan Road yelling, "We won, we won, we won." I think they went all the way to Evanston, like at midnight. Oh, so joyous and so joyful.
You just have no idea the pride that I have for those guys.
It was unbelievable. It was good to see the starting five get the reward that they had earned.
George, how does it feel to be a national champion of the NCAA? All right.
It's the first time we brought a team to the tournament, and we just said, look, we're having a poor first half. I know you can beat them. Let's go out and give it to them.
And that is the championship for 1963 and one of the most unbelievable comebacks of all time.
America was sitting witness to this evolution of the game by 7 out of 10 African Americans starting in that game.
Loyola did what they set out to do, but their win represented so much more. The end of the tournament marked the beginning of their legacy, one that shaped the sport and their lives for years to come. The Ramblers returned home to Chicago as champions that March of 1963, the first school in the state of Illinois to ever win a Division I national title.
How do you feel after your 4 years at Loyola?
Well, I feel tremendous. This is a great thing. I won the championship in basketball, and that's exactly what I wanted.
The win was celebrated not just by Loyola, but the entire city of Chicago. So Ireland proudly paraded their trophy around town, including a barbershop across from campus where 4 of the Iron Five weren't even allowed inside. As for Jerry Harkness, after graduating, he had a short-lived pro career in the ABA before returning to Chicago and finding work as a salesman on the north side, close to campus. Now, he was just a young black man trying to build a life.
I could see all of those people out there cheering as we won the national title. Then when it got time to just move, I could not get a place to stay. And they came up with all kind of excuses. I was being discriminated against. There was no doubt about it.
The story of the 63 Ramblers made me wonder, what was really different now? Did their accomplishments change anything? The answer is complicated, but their lasting effect on basketball is clear.
The 63 team changed the game, made it faster, more interesting, a lot more fun to watch, almost like a ballet.
It was the beginning of modern basketball.
That changed the landscape of college sports. We were able to work together with all this diversity and come out a winner. And then common sense would tell us, well, can't we do that in society as well?
One part of America was making changes.
Texas Western takes the first major sports title the school has ever won.
And the other part was not. I got involved in the civil rights movement after school. We had an obligation to do something, say something about how the situation was.
Sports has a way of tearing down barriers faster than the rest of society. And when athletes use their platform to demand justice, they can often turn their victories into something much bigger. But they can't do it alone.
The world of college basketball has lost a pioneer. Jerry Harkness was best known for the history he made as a Loyola Rambler. Harkness would go on to work for the United Way of Central Indiana. He helped start the Indiana Black Expo, and he was the first Black sportscaster on Indianapolis television. Jerry Harkness was 81 years old.
During the 1963 season, we see numerous stories being told, and the obvious one is a story about a team with 4 Black players, and they play well, and they win. And the story doesn't stop, because the story is not just about basketball. The story is about the worth of an athlete, the worth of a Black man, their place in society, and what they can demand.
It's just a tremendous honor for all the team members to be recognized. It's a chance to see the effect that you've had on some of the people that played, some of the Black players that we opened some doors for.
We are extremely proud of you. You represent the university and yourselves extremely well.
We try to do our best to just imitate like you guys and like what you guys have done.
The best we can do is say this is to be continued. It is a work in progress. It is a project that's not yet ended. to make our country one that's worthy of what these men went through.
The most important thing is that we keep telling the story. Looking back, you have a better understanding of why we are in the situation that we are today.
One day, hopefully long from now, my time playing basketball will come to an end. But there will always be more work to do, more unwritten rules to break, more ways to make the world better for the next generation. To me, that's the inspiration I think we can all carry forward. That's the legacy of the 63 Ramblers.
Hi, I'm glad that you had the opportunity to watch this film, and it's my third time seeing it, and I hope that you'll take the time to watch it again because you learn a lot every time that you watch it. We now have, I just want to introduce Dr. Gary Sales, who will be our facilitator for this documentary. And moving to the next slide. Gary, or Doc Sales, as he's known affectionately by athletes and students, colleagues, is a wonderful human being. He sees himself, describes himself as a citizen of the world. When he thinks about diversity, he explains that growing up, he was a military brat, so he didn't actually come back to the United States until he was in university, but he instead spent time in other countries, including Canada, but in high school in Portugal. And so he had a bit of a different experience of race relations and learned to embrace the cultural experiences of other people rather than to feel different from or to critique them. He was a scholar athlete. He was an outstanding basketball player, among other sports, but that was expected of him because of his race, whereas he was also an outstanding academic. And it was there that people would constantly express surprise that he was bright, because that didn't fit the stereotype. And that was kind of an awareness that he had it, in high school, that people put people into other different kinds of boxes of what they were capable of. And he was in the capability box for being an athlete, no surprise, but not for being bright and an academic. He went on to sociology undergrad and eventually became an award-winning professor at Indiana University. He's a sports sociologist, colleague of mine, which I'm honored to have, and worked in the Department of Sport Management. He saw himself working towards the racial dynamics, improving the racial dynamics of sport in the United States through his research. He has published 9 books, several, dozens of research articles, but he also, throughout his career and continuing to today, is an advocate on collegiate athlete access. He has spoken at congressional hearings. He led 2 of them on college sport, spoke at the IOC Congress on abuses in college athletics and the value of diversity. He's a commercial sport industry consultant, so he works with athletes, organizers at the university, professional, and Olympic levels. And he has used his scholarship to work towards his vision of diversity, which is that we are all made stronger by having the opportunity to know about each other. And he is an exemplar of that. He, among his award-winning activities, in 2011, the North American Society for Sport Sociology gave him the Distinguished Service Award. And at that point, they also renamed we have a Graduate Diversity Award scholarship that is given out every year since 2005 to a student who self-identifies as a racial minority for their contributions. They speak on their contributions to the field and to NAS. And after Gary was given this Distinguished Service Award, they also honored him by renaming this award the Gary Sales Graduate Diversity Award to recognize his contributions, his advocacy, because he would contribute the $500 that the winner won every year from 2005, and starting in 2013, we have master's and doctorate. So he was the person who was actually funding these award winners. And that's just a small example of the kind of advocacy that he does. And then the last activity that he's been very involved with is contributing towards documentaries, as you saw through the film that we just watched. But just looking at this stream, I myself, in kind of researching a bit on this, learned a lot about African Americans and their contributions and controversies in sport. George Taliaferro, known as the Jackie Brown of college and NFL, was the first African American who was drafted into the NFL. The Game of Change is a focus on the Mississippi State Loyola Ramblers game that we just saw in this film. The Black Athlete Fact and Fiction, for those of us that are older would know, Tom Brokaw in 1989 explored for the public both the biases and stereotypes about Black athletes and the things that we knew through scholarship. The Johnny Bright story is in its, they're just working to finish that one off, and we'll be seeing this at the end of this year, hopefully, or early next year. And again, it was a 1951 story, a Heisman contender who was down in Oklahoma, and they targeted him. It was after he'd thrown a play and they broke his jaw. He went on, he came in 5th in the Heisman, eventually played pro football in Canada and is in our Hall of Fame. But the team was never sanctioned or disciplined for this terrible thing that happened. The Loyola Project, we know he's been actively involved with, and he is aiming for another project starting up next year on this journey story, the Black athlete. So last slide, just to finish off here. I feel that Mina Denny, who does a podcast and interviewed Gary, said it best, quoting whether Doc is teaching a sport and social justice class, giving Black athletes a platform to speak, or writing a book about the Black athlete experience. He has and is creating a safe space for open conversation about these controversies. That's the best way that I could express that we're fortunate to have Gary now be able to facilitate our reflections on race and sport tied to this film that we've just watched. So Gary, thanks for coming in from Indiana, and we're looking forward to your comments.
Okay, well, thank you, Victoria. I appreciate it very much. This has been a wonderful, wonderful journey being tied to the to the film. And it was a joy to work on this film. And it's interesting how one thing leads to another. My sports sociology class, Jerry Harkness Jr., who was also in this documentary, is the producer director of the Loyola Project, which is about specifically the game between Mississippi State and Loyola University. And obviously that film led to the creation of this film. And I was so pleased to see that Jerry Jr. was in both films. Jerry Harkness was a brother of mine in 100 Black Men. I would like to call him friend, and that I'm a friend of the family. So I'm honored, blessed, feel privileged to do all of this. Let me tell you how all this got started. It was really interesting. Back in junior high school, I didn't know what all the fuss was about skin color. What all the fuss was about. And I started examining it, but not as a scholar, but as a witness. I noticed things like, we weren't segregated because I was a military brat. We were separated. Do you know what I mean? We kind of like converged into our own little groups, Blacks over here, whites over here. And when we interacted, I guess the worst it was just awkward. It was awkward interacting with people who were different. And, I was what Keith Harris calls a scholar baller. I was, I was an athlete. I was on the basketball team, the baseball team. I was, you name it, I did it. But at the same time, I was, National Honor Society. So being a college professor was but
I was always intrigued by why does skin color matter so much, and it just broke my heart to see, how we treated each other. And I didn't have labels like racism, discrimination, and bias. Those things I got as a scholar. One story I have to tell. I'm in my gym, just practicing by myself like Jerry Harkness did, and this beautiful black body shows up, about 6'6", chocolate skin, chiseled features. I said, what the, like when Jerry saw Jackie, I saw this guy. So, and he joined me, says, hey man, you want to just shoot and rebound? And I said, sure. This was the starting point guard for Ohio State University. I have seen these guys on TV, but never in person. This was my first, I could reach out and touch this guy. And I just remember being awestruck. I just remember being, wow, I would love to be like him. He's probably privileged, gets all this adulation. He's insulated from all the negative stuff that us regular po folks have to deal with. And I just remember just wanting to be like him. And that was the beginning of my motivation to really just work on my game and to get to that level, which I never did, by the way. Okay. But then I became a scholar. In undergrad, I studied sociology, and I specifically wanted to study race. And I was introduced to Gordon Allput. I can't remember the name of his book. Vicki, you're going to have to help me. Gordon Allput's book, if you look it up, and share it with me, but I was like flabbergasted. And then I took an Afro class and learned about the civil rights movement and all of the things that were going, because I was in an insulated community, the military. And then after I, started studying race dynamics in our culture, I also, came upon, race in the military, and they were segregated. I will share a short story. Our guys were overseas. I don't remember the country, but the military police came in. It was Great Britain. And the military police came in and made our guys leave a white bar because segregation was, the policy of the military and the American military, but not in England. And even then, it left the country and followed us overseas. Just all kinds of just inequities and indignities that we had to experience. So this was the beginning of my journey. I didn't label it as racism or prejudice or discrimination, because as an athlete, I had no lack of confidence. Let me tell you that right now. Okay. But I will tell you this. I learned that no matter what you do, your wealth, your education, your titles, your income, your social status, even our president was not insulated from this thing that we're studying, the race dynamics. People are either going to be threatened by you, fearful of you, fearful of the black body, which, Victoria, I'm sure, we study in sports sociology. And I was just, why? And then I came across words like social dissonance, because we don't interact, because we segregate ourselves, because we don't practice diversity, because we live in our own individual bubbles, because that's comfortable. Well, guess what? On the other side of discomfort and uneasiness and those hard conversations is understanding and enlightenment. And that's why it's important for films like this to be told. You athletes, and those of you who are studying to work in the sports industry, I have a lot of people who agree, scholars, athletes, coaches, who agree that if there is one institution that really addresses, attacks, whatever word you want to use, diversity, it is sport, where people from various backgrounds come together for a common goal. And in that journey, guess what we do? We fall in love with each other. And I call that, friendships, lifelong relationships, and things like that. Why? Because we look past what we see on the exterior. We look past the exteriors. And as a result, you guys are in a great opportunity in higher ed, If you're an athlete or a non-athlete, I mean, you look around yourselves and you see diversity around you. I say embrace it because it's a strength, because it's that diversity that takes us forward. I'd like to introduce you guys to a scholar named Tim Weiss. Tim Weiss is a Caucasian male, and his scholarship, his platform, his activism focuses on how white racism specifically, white bias, white stereotypes, white privilege actually adversely affects white society as well. Now, let me give you an example of that, okay? In this film, Mississippi State was victimized by the race politics of the governor and the state and the culture. And by the way, that culture had a minority fan base, not a majority. In other words, the majority of people in Mississippi wanted Mississippi State to go to play the NCAA all 3 years. That wasn't really highlighted in the film, but if you guys watch the first film, The Game of Change, that is revealed. But Tim, Mississippi State was the victims of white racism. Look at the relationship between Jack Egan and Jerry Harkness. And Jerry and Jack, they came together as friends and were very, very close friends right up until when Jerry left us. But in the beginning, it was race politics that separated those two guys, and they ended up becoming teammates. They became close friends and won a national championship. In other words, these biases, these stereotypes, these things hurt everyone, not just people of color, which seems to be 90% of the content that we read, see in the media, and things like that. So my journey for doing these films, my reason for writing these books and for speaking and for maintaining, the scholarships is because we need to keep this conversation going forever. I am so happy that Colin Kaepernick did what he did. He paid for it like most pioneers did back in the day. Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, Jack Johnson, I just name all of them. They paid for it, but those pioneers opened doors for the rest of us. Today, with Black Lives Matter, it is mainstream. It's in Under Armour commercials, Nike commercials. It's being adopted by athletic departments, the league. I mean, even the NFL changed its stance on, Colin Kaepernick and his right to freedom of speech, regardless of the resistance that President Trump put out there, saying that these guys need to be extricated from the league. Well, Trump, you're wrong, bruh. Everyone knows what's right, and doing what's right feels good. But always remember this. Is it tough to continue this conversation? Yes, it is. Is it frightening? Yes, it is. And for some people, it's even threatening. But I want to remind you that on the other side of putting out documentary films like this, just sitting down in your own home, having a conversation with family and friends, and for professors like Victoria Parashak and myself to show this, these stories and share our research in our respective classes, keeps the conversation going. Bottom line, I am recruiting agents of change. I want to be a part of that process. It is how I am wired. I don't know any other way to proceed in life. I'm not the kind that's going to be carrying a sign and protesting. I'm not going to let myself get incarcerated and have my family deal with that and all of this. But I will through my scholarship, through doing films and my books and through my classes. And I don't mind telling you a project that I'm working on right now. So Victoria, I'm very happy to share with you and our viewership. I'm working with the United Golfers Association. As a consultant, the United Golfers Association was established in 1925. It provided African-American golfers with a tour where they can compete for money as professional golfers, because the PGA had a whites-only clause. Now, the UGA folded in the 1960s when the PGA rescinded its law and allowed African-Americans to play on that tour. But the UGA has resurrected in the last few years, and their agenda has been in alignment with my mission, which was to get more persons of color on tour. And I'm working with Hispanic and Asians and Caucasian and African Americans. Haven't met any Native Americans yet. And I have either sponsored them or I work with them as a coach, a holistic coach, to get them ready for tour, providing them with data. And that's what I'm doing now. So I've spent the last few weeks down in Florida and saw that the benefit of my work was immediate. So I'm very happy about that. But I want you guys to think about two things as I kind of conclude my comments, all right? My activism is because it's in my DNA, and I don't know where it came from. I guess my mom, she was the one person that had the greatest impact on my life, all right? But I would ask you, what was your greatest takeaway from this film? What was your greatest takeaway? Mine was the fact that Mississippi State was victimized by white racism, and that white racism kept Jack Egan and Jerry Harkness from each other. And Tim Weiss would ask you, what if, the Jim Crow was the law in the South? You could not marry as far north as Virginia even. And what if, Obama's parents were living in the South? Obama never would have been born, and we never would have had a first president who was of African-American descent. Tiger Woods, if Tiger's family lived in the South, perhaps, that would have been, this was, post Jim Crow, but even still, dating someone outside your race just, in the South, not only was it not practiced, it was against the law. You could be arrested. In the film, there's one scene that just resonates with this. It was the cab scene, when they were in New Orleans, and Coach Egan gets in the cab with Jerry and one of the players and a black cab driver. And the cab driver says to Coach Egan, "Sir, you can't ride in this cab. You have to get out." And he says, "Don't worry, if there's a fine, I'll pay it." The cab driver said, "No, you don't understand. If I get stopped, I will be arrested." My father told me a story where he was in Birmingham, Alabama. He was military, and he was just on the street having a conversation with one of his GI buddies who happened to be white. They were approached by a police officer and was told, "This conversation is against the law, and the only reason I'm not arresting you is because you're in uniform." And he told them, "Break up the conversation and split up." My dad told me that story. I says, "Pops, you got to be kidding." He says, "No, that was the law in the South." Just to give you an idea of just how serious segregation was. This film is a great portrayal of what was going on. And I want you to think about something else too. The letters, okay, the hate mail. I want to see those letters. As a scholar, those are historical documents. Anything that can confirm and validate my research, and those letters would do that, I want my hands on. So I hope that one day that, the Egan family will release those letters, but I got to remind them, you guys are in violation of federal law. I don't know if you all knew this. I did a little bit of research and I asked around. When you mail a letter and you put it in a mailbox, that is the property of the federal government until it's delivered to its recipient. Then it becomes personal mail. So they are in possession of federal property, and they are guilty of theft. I hate to put it out there like that, but I hope the Egans realize, wow, we better release these and get these documents back to the kids, and hopefully release them so that we can do some research and move forward to see just how much venom was spewed on this team. And I think it would add to the story. So, but Vicki, that's it. I just wanted to just share with you my connection to this very important film. I am happy to have been invited to join the film on the tour. And even though you guys had a slide that said 63 for 63 because they won the championship in 63, but I want you to know that we have over 120 schools nationwide who are showing this film that signed up. Northwestern Mutual, thank you for your sponsorship. Patrick, thank you for including me and my research in this and giving me just another platform to get the message out, to recruit more agents of change I encourage you all to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, to not be afraid of it, because it moves us all forward. And on the other side of this discomfort, if you're feeling that, is going to be enlightenment and communication and understanding. So that being said, I just want to stop here, open it up for questions that you may have, and just take it. Victoria, did you want to read the questions, or did you want me to read the questions?
Well, I haven't seen any questions in there. But what I was going to ask instead is if people want to put thoughts into the chat about your question, which is, what part of the movie most connected to you? Or if they want to ask a specific question about the movie or about your work or broader issues of race relations, might be easiest to just throw it in the chat and we can read it to Gary. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask you, with all the advocacy that you've done,
yes, ma'am.
What are the unique contributions for you as a person and for the public of doing documentaries like this one?
Oh, wow. First of all, they're fun. Oh my, are they fun. And they say, be yourself. And says, hey, be careful what you wish for, So they say, be yourself. And Victoria, one of the things that I think that makes me a scholar is what Dr. Carter Francique says is lived experiences, okay? And I live these experiences. I'm not bitter. It helps me to understand, the politics of what's going on, so that we can get on the other side of this, where we can all move forward, and pursue the same goals, and work together as teams. Sport is a great, great, great institution where these things are in front of us, and they're mainstream. They're in print, they're in books, they're in media, they're in video, they're websites, they're in our classes. Diversity is alive and well. And like I said in the video, if we can do it under the stressful conditions of competitive sports, we can do this in society. I mean, look at what corporate mission statements are all about. And I remember one of the reasons why I chose to teach at Indiana University is because the mission statement of that sport management program intersected with my own. Students first, development, going out and implementing change. And I would add the word social because I'm a sociologist. But we were trying to change the landscape of sport by bringing in, individuals, and man has, hey folks, I'm 70 years old. This thing that we have now is nothing like it was when I was in high school and college. I mean, I look at it right now and I'm thinking, that landscape needs scholars and consultants to help the kids navigate that landscape, because it is a multi-billion-dollar industry that's only getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The demands and pressure on student athletes is getting bigger and bigger. So consultants are necessary, mental health, to come in and consult with mental health on how to deal with all of these. But that's the long answer to a short question. But that's my joy was just seeing everything visually. We brought in a consultant at Indiana years ago, and she said, we are video learners because we're in the digital age. And my son is even in school. He does digital art. That's his thing. And so it's the platform where everyone's learning from. It's the most popular platform. And they were talking about cell phones and video and YouTube and all this. And this is how we're learning. So you're going to reach a larger audience. And for that reason, I'm grateful for being able to be a part of the journey.
Since nobody is asking, I'll ask one more and then maybe we can wrap it up. But if you were to do a next documentary building from this and focus on race relations and the Coach Ireland, what would you like? It's the complexities, as you said, the letters that he didn't necessarily allow them to see, the fact that he gave protection for his family but not his athletes. Like, how is he wrapped into, or how would you use him as a learning tool for reflecting on enhancing diversity, with all the historical work that you've done?
Yeah, well, when I saw that he was receiving a lot of criticism for his decision to keep his teams separated when they were in New Orleans, I decided to examine that, and I put myself in his place. I coached basketball for just 2 years. I know that separating my team is counter to everything that I'm trying to do on a road trip. And I'm thinking something awfully, awfully important or threatening had to have been present for him to do that. But, so was there a bomb threat? Was there death threats? Did they find out that Xavier University offered to put the entire team up? But there again, on the other side, Xavier University is a historically Black college, all right? And so I'm wondering, by staying there, was he worried about being arrested because they could have been arrested, all right? Or was it his own politics? I don't want to stay at a Black university and expose my white players to that. So I have a lot of questions about this, but when we do our research, one missing item can change the interpretation of your results. What is missing from this story? Because there's the story of the athletes that feel that they were discriminated against. There's the story from George Ireland, which is pretty quiet, and there's not a lot of information other than it was revealed a couple of days later that Xavier University offered to put the boys up, the entire team, Black and white, but that offer was against the law. So let's not forget about that as well. All right. So there could have been a police raid and they'd come in and arrest, the Black guys and make the white guys go to a white hotel. That could have been the case. Or was there a bomb threat? Were there death threats? What happened? Because we don't know. So a lot of people, and this is where I caution people, race does not explain everything. Mm-hmm. Race does explain everything. Let me tell you what happened here in Indiana. I'm a storyteller. I'm a Greek. I can't help myself. So Anderson High School, it's closed now, but about a decade ago, Anderson High School had a Black starting quarterback, and the backup was white. The Black quarterback was a dual threat. He could get yards on the ground with his feet, or he could pass. Their starting wide receiver was injured and lost for the season. The second best wide receiver on the team was the starting Black quarterback. So the coach made the conscious decision to move him to the wide receiver position and elevate this white backup who was mostly a pocket passer. So he felt that was his best option because, the other guy was an equivalent passer. He just lost yards on the ground. So this was the story. Everybody said, oh, you just want to put that white kid in there over a Black guy. A Black guy can't get any love. And, we all know that the white guys are more experienced and the Black guys are more athletic. And all these racial stereotypes emerged in the media. So, I decided to call the coach, and he said, it was a tactical decision, man. That's all it was. I didn't care what color anybody was. I moved my starting quarterback. And that hurt me in my heart because, we had college scholarships, scouts looking at him. But I wanted to win. My team wanted to win. And guess what? He was okay with it. He was okay with it. The family wasn't because I wanted to play quarterback. But everybody played the race card. It doesn't explain everything. Okay? Doesn't explain everything. So as a myth buster, as a sports sociologist, I'm not afraid to tell these stories. And because it's too easy to just play the race card when a lot of times it's not about race at all.
Okay, I just had one. Lana is asking here, how much of an impact has this story made on people outside of the Black community? Have you heard about it changing the culture or stigma around any athletes, or has it in any way been something that has created more change for white people to understand the repercussions and racism that Black athletes still face now? Thank you.
Lana, thank you for your question. And the honest answer is it's too soon to tell. This film just came out. It's only been out for like a month and a half. But I'll tell you this, I plan to show this film in my class, and my assignment, the writing assignment attached to this is exactly that question. So I haven't shown this in class yet, but we're getting there. Based on the feedback that I'm getting from the audiences, and I've been to 7 of these, it's kind of like, wow, I didn't know it was that bad back then. So yes, it is impacting. People are learning. It's changing people's attitudes. And when I tell people, it's not that difficult to just have a conversation, because that's how social movements get started, by conversations, and then people amp it up. Colin Kaepernick was trying to send a message, and it cost him his career, but that message was heard worldwide. And men, women, athletes from different sports, athletes from different ethnic backgrounds and races heard the message. So that's what this film hopes to do. That's what this film, I am positive, will accomplish. And we are just at the beginnings of this, but it's a very powerful message. If nothing else, it's a historical document that kind of places us in the mindset of, know your history, because if you don't, you're bound to repeat it. So by putting that out there, we are in a position to make sure that things like this not only will never happen again, but we can move forward. And I have no doubt that this film has probably motivated some people to get off their behinds and to get engaged. If nothing else, than just to have a conversation, like I say, in class, over a beer, some chicken wings, blue cheese dressing, and some celery and carrot stick. That's my favorite conversation meal right there at a bar, okay? And we got IU basketball on the screen, and we're yelling at each other, man, shut up, I want to see the shot. And then we get back to talking about the film and race, politics, and diversity. Just have the conversation. And this film, I have no doubt will do that. But its impact, I can't wait to show this in class and then get in my kids' heads, my students' heads. So thank you, Lana, for your question.
Okay, well, at this point, I could go on forever listening to you, Gary, to be honest, but I'll wrap it up because I know others have to go and do other things. I wanted to just finish by thanking again the organizing committee, who came from men's basketball in particular and had a real commitment to, right away to wanting to have this shown in the community and also at the university. HK, Department of Kinesiology, and our dean, who strongly supported it. The WIF, our film festival, supported it, and gave us a really good experience at the armories. HK Society helped us out. And we needed some finances that we wanted to distribute out to the community. And I just wanted to give a last thank you to not only our dean, who was the first to give us some funding, men's basketball, the WUFA, not both the executive and the faculty council. With One Voice is an organization, Gary, you'd be interested in. It's here, yeah. And it's having Black athletes speak to their experiences and sharing those out to benefit them and to benefit others, and kind of going along with Lana's idea to be able to extend these stories so we know more and can learn more. And they've been a wonderful supporter of this. Office of Human Rights, Equity, and Accessibility, the Office of Student Experience, and Northwestern Mutual, as you said, was the actual funder for the whole documentary, asking amazingly that we make sure that nobody has to pay to see this, and that we have a discussion facilitated afterwards on race and sport. And we've been it leads me to my final thanks to Gary, Doc Sales, just that and I spoke with the people from WIF at the end of the Armories one, and they just said, this is exactly what makes for a great experience, because we see a great film and then we have an amazing facilitated discussion afterwards, so we can really reflect on it. And certainly that's what we've experienced through your words, Gary. Wish you some wings and go and celebrate the end of St. Patty's Day, and so I'm sure some of the people watching now will be doing the same thing. But you take care, have fun with your own class, and it certainly made a difference for us that you were here. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and thank everyone for attending. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Take care. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, everybody. Be safe today as you see St. Patty's Day. So may it go well. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.